All right, welcome back. I just want to compare the second lines of the Bruins and the Minnesota Wild. Wild being these three, Bruins being these four. It's notable with the Bruins that Charlie Coyle centered that second line for like the first 34, 36 games or something. And then Hollis stepped in after that and became the second line center. So let's get into it. First up, the Wild, we got Marcus Felino on the wing, playing 39 games, 17 goals, 10 assists for a total of 27 points. Having a career year offensively, which is nice to see. Notable, his shooting percentage is 29.3%, which is it's just out of this world. You don't see stats like that very common. So it's almost a third of the shots he takes go in, and it's not like he takes a lot of shots. So it's cool to see that 17 goal number so far through 39 games. I know the team's played more, but that's a fun little stat. Joel Eriksson Ek, 2015 first round draft pick by the Wild, 36 games, 13 goals, 10 assists for 23 points. He's had some injuries throughout this. Well, all three of these guys have had injuries throughout this season. That's caused them to miss games. In addition to COVID, I know Eriksson Ek had COVID. I think Greenway had COVID. Maybe all three of these guys had COVID. I don't know. Don't quote me on that. Eriksson Ek definitely had COVID, though. You can quote me on that. Eriksson Ek, drafted to be a two-way centerman, kind of like Patrice Bergeron. Plays incredible defense, but his offensive production has been steadily increasing year in and year out. He just got a $5.25 million extension for I don't know how many years, like long term, between 5 and 8. So that contract's already aging very well. He's already living up to that. It's nice to see. He's great in the face-off dot. He's great defensively. Jordan Greenway is also the right wing on that line. 34 games played. He has 4 goals, 10 assists, 14 points. Notable, 2 of his 4 goals were game-winning goals. And I'm not talking about one of those game-winning goals where it's like, oh, you look at the stat sheet at the end of the game. It's like, oh, he got a game-winning, like Marchand got a game-winning goal in the halfway through the second period. Cool. Is that really a game-winning goal? I guess. No, Greenway, these are I think one was in overtime in a 3-on-3, and one was in the final minute of a game. They're very clutch game-winning goals. I know it's only 2, but it's also half of his goal production are game-winning goals, so that's fun to see. These 3 guys, all 3 of them can play a very physical game. Mostly Greenway and Felino are very physical players. They're big guys. Eriksson Ek's a big dude too. He plays physical. He gets a little gritty. You're not going to see Eriksson Ek drop the gloves really often. You're most likely to see it from a Felino and Greenway, probably here and there. But the thing about this line is their offensive production isn't necessarily where you want it to be for a second line, but that's not why they're on the second line. They are the Wild second line because of that defensive production, and because they play basic hockey, because they get gritty goals, and because they play the right way. Excellent defensive line. One of the best defensive lines in all of hockey, in my opinion. I think, I don't know, maybe a couple of years ago, if you had Marchand, Bergeron, and I don't know, Craig Smith on a line together, it could be, I don't know. Because Marchand and Bergeron are 2 of the best defensive players in the game. Craig Smith's all right, but I don't know. These guys, the way they gel, the way they have a lot of chemistry, and they score a lot of gritty goals, kind of David Backes style, getting in front of the net, chipping it in, play chippy hockey. But this is Dean Edvinsson. He's the Wild's coach. This is his go-to line. If the game's getting weird or out of hand, or the Wild are playing sloppy hockey, he puts this line on the ice and lets them play, and kind of sets the example for the rest of the team, and it really resets the Wild as a team. It's such a unique thing. I don't think I've ever seen that with a team. At least me. I don't know. But it's really cool. It's a really fun line to watch. I love this line. This is probably my favorite second line in all of hockey. Moving on to the Bruins, though. Yeah, Pastrnak, who again through I don't know how many he played the 30-something games on the first line with Bergeron and Marchand. Now he's on the second line, but his offensive production has actually increased a bit when moving to the second line, which is nice to see because that really gives the Bruins some depth. It's something they've been lacking, especially when Coyle was centering that second line with Hall and Craig Smith when he was on it. Now he's playing on the first line, but it was a brutal line to watch when it was on the ice. Not so much anymore. You got Pastrnak, 43 games played, 22 goals, 21 assists, 43 points. You got Taylor Hall, who's been the only consistent second liner on the Bruins this season. 43 games played, 10 goals, 19 assists, 29 points. Already said goals. Eric Haula, again, I don't even think he's played 10 games on that second line. 40 games played in total, 5 goals, 11 assists, 16 points. It's notable that almost all of Eric Haula's points have come when he's been playing on the second line, which isn't many games. Prior to that, when Coyle was the second line center, Haula was fourth line center, and there was a game where he had like 7 minutes of time on ice, but he was usually averaging between like 10 and 12 minutes of time on ice, and wasn't really given that opportunity to be the player he is. So it was really nice to see them finally make a change, finally have Haula at least attempt playing on that second line, and it's been a revelation for this Bruins team. Pastrnak, Haula, and Hall have all played very well together. Every single one of those players have had a significant increase in offensive production since that line's been formed, and honestly, it's been a lot of fun to watch. Haula can play a good defensive game. Hall can when he wants, and Pastrnak, he could just surprise some people in the back check. He can be sneaky quick and sneak up on you and make a big defensive play. So it's fun to watch. Pasternak's actually played a lot more defensively responsible hockey the past couple of years. I think part of that's playing on a line with Bergeron and Marchand. But it's carrying over into this line, and when they need to play defense, they'll play defense, but once they get the puck, it's all offense, and it's a lot of fun to watch. Charlie Coyle, Charlie Coyle, 43 games played, 10 goals, 10 assists, 20 points. Very, very lackluster season. Pretty standard by Charlie Coyle standards. I don't know if he gets back to being a second line center or seeing that time on ice be upwards of 19 to 24 minutes a game, which he was seeing for some reason. You might see him hit 20 goals this season, but if he's a third line center or a fourth line center, he hasn't played fourth line center yet this season, but he's not hitting 40 points. And he plays on the power play too, so that's also notable where his points come from. Haula's face-off percentage, 50.81. Charlie Coyle's is actually up, surprisingly, 46.87%. This is kind of a different look. This is something that the Bruins have taken a lot of pride in. Is they're a defensively responsible team. They always have been. Their mindset's changed really with the leaving of Chiarelli and Claude Julien. Sweeney and Bruce Cassidy are more offensive minded, and that's like whatever. The league's been, you got to change with the league. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but Haula gets a lot of. Well, the Bruins had Bergeron, who's a top faceoff guy. They had Krejci, who was plus 50s all the time in the faceoffs. They were really strong down the middle, so they've kind of been missing that element. So I've always really looked at how important faceoffs can be, because how many faceoffs have the Bruins won, or really any team late in the game in an important situation, and scored a goal as a result? It happens. They can be a difference maker in a game. Not saying it's the most important thing in the game, but it can be a difference maker. So Haula, 50.81%. As I said earlier, he wins a lot of clutch faceoffs, whereas Coyle, when it's clutch faceoff time, typically loses them. And I don't know. It's just, I don't know. It's just an interesting thing to look at. It's almost, I wish Coyle just needs to work on his face-offs, and I don't know if he needs confidence, because I've seen him take some really impressive draws, but he really needs to win more face-offs than he does. So really interesting to look at these two lines. They're very different, and it's almost like it kind of really, a second line is a big identity to a team. You know, you have your first line, you have your second line, which is like the beginning of your depth, and you have defense, your defensive pairings and how they match up. All right, and lastly, the defenseman comparison. The NHL, I don't know, a few weeks ago asked a question through Instagram and maybe other social media. You know, who would you rather have, Dumba or Krug? You know, Matt Dumba or Torrey Krug? That's a tough question, honestly. It's a really tough question. And I threw some shade that probably wasn't warranted at Dumba video or two ago. But let's dive into it. It's interesting. So Dumba, 39 games played, 4 goals, 16 assists for 20 points. He's +9, 34 penalty minutes. It's notable that he doesn't play on the power play much, really at all. He did a bit during COVID, and so he only has a total of 4 power play points this season, which is way more than I thought he had, to be honest. But hey, not complaining. Krug, 39 games played, 6 goals, 19 assists, 25 points. He's a +18, which is kind of a stat that surprised me with Torrey Krug, but hey, and 32 penalty minutes. He has 12 power play points. So looking at 5-on-5 points, Dumba would have, 16? And Krug would have 13. So when it comes to 5-on-5 play, Dumba has produced a little more offensively. Krug is also a power play quarterback, and that's an important part of your team. So there's that aspect as well. Their current cap hits, Dumba at $6 million average annual value, Krug at $6.5 million. Dumba's average time on ice is 23 minutes and 39 seconds, whereas Torrey Krug's is 20 minutes and 51 seconds. I was actually surprised that Krug was that low, but you know, they're both second line pairing defensemen. They both have good offensive production. Dumba's more of a two-way defenseman, whereas Krug is more of an offensive defenseman. And I'm going to preface this by saying I haven't watched Torrey Krug play much in a Blues uniform. I'm kind of going off my Boston experience. This is his second year in St. Louis. So, going back to his Boston days, he acted more as a forward and could be a defensive liability more often than not. You know, and Dumba occasionally has that. But the Wild play very good team defense, and it's not very often that Dumba gets caught up in the offensive zone and leading to a breakaway. It probably happens once, I don't know, maybe like once every 6 or so games. It happened a couple games ago with Dumba. It was just, he left his defensive partner just stranded on an island with 2 guys while he was just, I don't know what he was doing. I don't know if he thought the puck was going to be dumped, and it didn't, because he was like behind the net when the breakaway started. The puck was at center ice, and Dumba's behind the opposing team's net. Like, it's 2-on-1. They scored on that play. Probably could have been avoided if Dumba was playing defense. But like I said, I saw that a whole lot more with Torrey Krug playing in Boston. And now Torrey Krug plays with Justin Falk, which is a really responsible, good defensive defenseman. And Dumba's partners kind of vary. You know, is he going to play with Goligoski tonight? Is he going to play with John Merrill tonight? Who's he going to play with tonight? So that's also a factor too. You know, Dumba's not playing with a defensive pairing that's as strongly defensively minded as Krug is. So, that factors in. If I had to choose between these players, I'd probably take Dumba of these two. Dumba can be an offensive powerhouse if he needs to be. He doesn't need to be for the Minnesota Wild. They just need him to play defense. But he has a lot of offensive upside, and he's shown a lot of potential. There was one season a few years ago. He started off with don't quote me on these numbers because I'm too lazy to look these up. It was 6 goals in 9 games to start the season. He was scoring he had a couple assists. He was scoring at a great rate, point per game at that point, and he had a fairly major injury. I forget what it was. But he was out for a couple months, never kind of regained that offensive production throughout the rest of the season when he came back. But nonetheless, it's there if you need it from Dumba. But he's a solid second line defenseman. If you need him to play on a first line with a responsible an established first line defenseman in the NHL, he's an option. But I think both of these guys are set being second pairing defensemen. I think and Krug has a lot of term left on his contract. Dumba, his contract runs up after next year, so you kind of reevaluate that contract. Just kind of looking at it initially, I was like, wow, Dumba's contract might be a little more than what he brings to the table. But in reality, not really. It's actually not too bad. He's, for what he brings, comparatively speaking to the rest of the league and other defensemen, it's about right. So, I don't know. I thought that was just a fun little analysis to look at. I like both of these players. I think it was good for Krug to leave Boston and for Torrey Krug. Dumba, I don't necessarily think it's not needed for him to leave that team. Here's another little side note. Dumba in the locker room is an incredible guy. He's a great leader. He's a really, really good guy to be around. He's really good for that locker room. That's kind of another aspect that doesn't get talked about a whole lot with NHL players. It does every once in a while, but you got a team like the Wild where you got a lot, kind of like the Bruins, you got a lot of different voices coming from a lot of players, but Dumba's been nothing but a positive impact on that locker room, and he just has a lot of chemistry with a lot of those players, and Krug does too, and he can be a decent voice in the locker room. It's not like he's a bad influence. He's not a bad player for the locker room. They're both good players, but Dumba brings an extra element to a locker room that is admirable. And if I was playing hockey, I don't think I would be living up to what Dumba brings. And I'm just being honest. So, who would you pick and why? I don't know. I think this is a very tough comparison. I don't think there's definitely no clear-cut winner. And I really just wanted to look at the Bruins and the Wild second lines because they're very different but very effective in different ways, kind of leading to the success of their respective teams. All right. I appreciate it, guys. I got nothing else. I'm going to do a little cameo on my dog, though, because he gets a little sassy. So, stay tuned for this little cutscene I'm about to do. Here's my buddy. Oh, look at the camera. Look at the camera. Hi. Yeah, you're on TV. This is my dog Obi. I love him a lot. He's 4-year-old Pembroke Welsh Corgi. Kind of funny that the guy that does Rob Talks Hockey just got a little tricolor gory, so it's kind of adorable. This little dude's my son, my life. I love him. Alright. This is my little doggy cameo. Yay! Alright, bud. Ready to be put down? Yeah. Alright. Alright. Thanks again, guys. Take care.